You are listening to Arcane Carolinas, an exploration of the Carolinas' folklore, legends, myths, and modern weird. Each episode, we examine the historical context of our topic and aim to preserve some of the stories that help make this part of the world such a fascinating place.
Hey y'all, Michael here. This episode was recorded live at ConGregate in Winston-Salem, North Carolina in July of 2024. Many thanks to my guest co-hosts and dear friends Tally Johnson and Gary Mitchell. I'll drop a couple of links in the show notes for Tally's books, and I'll also link to the amazing horror podcast Gary co-hosts, A Podcast of Amontillado, on which Charlie and I have both had the opportunity to appear as guests. Gary is also co-runner of the American Sci-Fi Classics track at DragonCon, which is such a wonderful and welcoming and frankly loving space. If you go to DragonCon, check them out. I just don't think a DragonCon trip is complete without spending some time there. So I kind of tell everybody that they should. I can't tell y'all how excited I was to spend some time talking with Tally and with Gary. The friendships that Charlie and I have made at conventions and through the show are really special to us. And I think they mean all the more to Charlie and to me because we started this show during quarantine as a way to feel a little less disconnected from the world. Seeing those friendships endure and grow and spread and seeing new connections get made, that means a lot to us. And I can't thank Gary and Tally enough for the chance to hang out and to just be ourselves with each other. That goes for you too. Thanks for listening and for the gift you make to us of your time when you do. And now, on with the show. I get really up in my head about if I sound imperfect, then they will hate me, which probably is a conversation I should be having with my therapist and not with y'all. But c'est la vie.
You have me on tape. Got me on record too. How many times over the years?
Okay.
Which means when you edit, you have to hear this for 3-4 hours a day. And you're worried about how you sound? Michael, come on now.
The vast majority of the time that I speak on Arcane Carolinas, I'm code switching. And so if I am startled awake at 3 a.m, then I sound a lot like you.
Yeah.
And so don't feel self-conscious at all.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, y'all just watch my mouth. Something will jump out you recognize.
Yeah, I had this conversation with someone yesterday. Part of the reason I moved out to Seattle was to try to get into voice acting. Mm-hmm. And I come to find out that a friend was sabotaging me because of my hick accent, which I don't. And they're like, you don't have an accent. I'm like, well, I can turn it on when I need to.
Exactly.
Right now, mine's cut off. So you can imagine when I really put it on thick, it comes out real thick, and you put on toast.
Okay, so
you're one of those people we'd have to have someone standing behind to subtitle you.
Oh no, yeah, you carved the side of a mountain, yeah.
So your radio voice and my not radio voice, a butt. Yeah. Basically. Yeah. Okay.
Face for radio, voice for silent movies.
Okay.
Patent pending. Yeah.
That's my music career right there.
We're real serious about this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Sam asked me, mostly I just want to get to hang out with the two of you, so here we are.
Here we go.
But Sam asked me if I wanted to sing at the karaoke this morning, and I was like, you don't need to punish people like that on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, thankfully I
You got to save that for the evening when the alcohol started.
I was once the choir director of a tiny church in very rural North Carolina when I was like 17. Mm-hmm. And nobody needs to be punished like that. No. The worst sinners do not deserve the hell that I put them through. So, anyway, welcome to Arcane Carolinas, live at ConGregate. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Woo!
I am multi-award-winning novelist and single award-winning podcaster, Michael G. Williams. It really amuses me to say that, and it makes me sound really conceited to say that, but I think it's so funny as totally not taking myself seriously intro. So
but you're worthy.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Would you introduce yourself, Tally?
I am Tally Johnson. I am a author, folklorist, storyteller, award-winning storyteller, and I am... This is my 7th or 8th time, I think, on Arcane Carolinas, and it gets more fun every time we do it.
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. My name is Gary Mitchell. Yes, Star Trek fans, that is my real name. I am a writer, reviewer, blogger, podcaster, dashing man about town. I am the co-director of the American Sci-Fi Classics track at DragonCon, and I am also the producer and co-host of a horror podcast called A Podcast of Amontillado.
It's so good, and both Charlie and I have been on it separately and really enjoyed it.
Yes, I have stickers and postcards, and you're going to make sure Charlie gets one of those stickers, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We now have that on audio record.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I promise that I will get one of those stickers to Charlie. And
Yeah, it will take
the good news for me is he doesn't actually listen to the show.
Oh, okay.
So I can take all of them, and he'll never know.
Okay, that's good to know. I'll keep that in mind. But yes, you have both been lovely guests on my show, and I'm very grateful.
Well, thank you. And normally at the beginning of an episode, we talk a little about upcoming appearances, and I record something outside of the recording session. Tack that on at the end. But I won't have you there for that. So let's talk about one of your big upcoming appearances in 2025 while we have people's attention early on.
Those of you who listen to the show regularly know that 2 years ago, Michael was guest of honor at RetCon in Raleigh, and I have followed in his illustrious footsteps. In 2025, I'm going to be the guest of honor at RetCon 2025. It's February 23rd through 25th. And if you like ghost stuff, I think you'll have a good time. As far as everything else, I have no idea. But as far as the ghost stuff, you'll have a really good time.
That's a safe description for anything involving you. If you like ghosts, you're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
Because Tally's there.
And if not, you're SOL.
I told this to you yesterday, but I just have to share with people that I wrote a novel in which there is a paranormal investigator, and a friend of mine was the first person to read it. And she messaged me and said, "Is that Tally Johnson in that book? Because if you do a bad thing to Tally Johnson, I will never forgive you."
And this person's never met me except on the show,
she
right?
has listened to the show. Yeah.
That's nice. I'm glad somebody out there likes me.
It's good to have fans.
It is.
Yeah.
So, what are we talking about today? We're talking about ghost vehicles of the Carolinas, because so many of us drove here to be here. Then I feel like ghost vehicles is a great topic for ConGregate.
Yeah. But we have to go outside the Carolinas for just a second to talk about the mother road of creepy vehicles.
Okay, we can. How about we do that? We'll start far out and we'll work our way back.
Route 666 runs from New Mexico up to Colorado, and the New Mexico section is the most notorious for weirdness. It goes through the Navajo Nation. So you've got your skinwalkers, you've got your vanishing hitchhiker, you've got devil dogs that will bite holes in your tires. You've got a phantom trucker who tries to run you off the road with his brakes on fire. There's a sports car who is prone to tailgate, run around and pass you, and then play tappy brakes for a couple of miles trying to make you wreck. Mm-hmm. Which it's on my bucket list to go riding up and down that road until something weird happens, or I get kidnapped by skinwalkers or some such.
Let's pause for just 1 second.
Okay.
And I'm going to get you to define some of the terms that you just used.
Okay.
Specifically, skinwalkers. I assume that probably if somebody is listening to Arcane Carolinas, they know what a skinwalker is, except that I myself am not totally sure what a skinwalker is. So please explain.
Okay. Let me preface this by saying skinwalkers have apparently become the new in thing in the paranormal community. Skinwalkers proper are a Navajo legend. It's part of their religious belief that there are people who can shapeshift into coyotes and other, I think there are even some that do roadrunners and different things too, desert wildlife. And they sulk on the edge of civilization, and much like in the mountains of North Carolina and Appalachia, if you go into their space, bad things happen. It's very much like the hags from the coast of South Carolina and North Carolina, where they can take their skin off, they can ride you, beat you about the head and neck, eat you if you're unfortunate enough. And apparently now that has become a thing for everything. I'm not going to say any names. Everything was a demon 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. Everything is now a skinwalker. It ain't true. If you're not in the Navajo Nation, whatever you run into ain't a skinwalker.
So it's been appropriated, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But there's been completely whitewashed from any native connection. And that's what drives me insane is, and there's some things floating around on social media about up in the Dakotas and the Sioux Reservation, they've had incidents. Well, their terminology is not skinwalker. If you're going to talk about other cultures, and we've had this discussion all there, you've got to respect the beliefs of the culture, and you've got to use their terms. Otherwise, it's just babble, and that's a whole nother hour.
And as a demonstration of that, my understanding prior to that explanation, thank you very much, was that it was basically just another word for werewolf. I didn't know the shamanistic aspect. I didn't know that it was a kind of person that if you stay out of their territory, you're fine. If you trespass, that's when you have problems. I didn't know any of that. I didn't know the Navajo connection. I just thought it was another word for werewolf.
Well, there's a certain predominant culture that I will not mention that seems to really enjoy finding things like this. And as you said, appropriating it or going, well, that's similar to something in our culture, like a werewolf. So we're just we're gonna take a werewolf and put a native skin on it, pardon the expression, and then make a really bad horror movie about it or something.
Right.
But I do like that there does seem to be more of a movement, at least in some parts of the community, to de-appropriate and kind of put these back in the context that they need to be in.
I really like that. I like the idea that there is energy put into returning these concepts so that we're not abusing them.
Well, I'll get off my soapbox in a minute.
Oh, no, this is a good soapbox.
Because
this is a soapbox not enough people get on. Yeah.
Because I'm fat, and we mentioned we just cave in. But the appropriation's been going on for years, and the problem in paranormal ghost hunter community is not enough of us try to do that. We don't give, as they say, props where they belong. Like the boohags and the plaid eyes on the coast are an African American phenomenon. We should not drag those into Asheville or Cincinnati or Seattle because you lose all your context. You've got to give the credits where it's due, and I try to do that as an old white Southern male. I try to give props where it's due to the different cultures. But again, I read stuff, I listen to podcasts, God knows TV, and they just don't get it. And it's not a hard concept.
It was like I've seen this meme float around a bit, and you've probably seen it, where it's, what if we talked about the major Christian beliefs the way we talk about some of these native beliefs? Like you have a group of teenagers in the basement, they find this big musty old book, and it says that he was dead for 3 days. Oh, it's just a legend.
But Gary, and of course, one reason I brought up Route 666 is besides the fact that I've used it in a story and it's on my bucket list, a birdie told me that you have actually been on that road.
I have. Back in 1996, when the internet was young, I met a lovely...
And so innocent.
I met a lovely person that lived in Salt Lake while I was living in North Carolina. And after a year, I was like, okay, I'm going to move out there. We're gonna make this work. It's going to be great. Long story short, it didn't work. I was there 2 months. But I packed up everything I owned into a Ryder truck and drove cross country to move to Salt Lake City. And I spent most of the drive. I also caught a cold the second day of the drive. So it was... Yeah, so I'm driving cross country on I-40 most of the way until I get to Route 666. And again, we're talking 96. There's no GPS. I have a map that I bought on the way. This is how good a planner I am. I bought my map of a highway system in Tennessee. It's like, I should probably know where I'm going.
Yeah.
So I was real bright.
You got plenty of time to study it on the way there.
Exactly.
Just going through Tennessee, you've got 16 hours. So yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I hit Route 66, the border there. I stop in the petrified forest in Arizona to get my bearings, scare some poor lady who's also trying to figure something out in her car just because it was twilight and there's a weird guy over there. But I check the map. I'm like, okay, I go here. I go up Route 66. I'm going to go up Route 66. This is fun. And so I start driving at about midnight. I hit Route 66 and I start driving north. And it suddenly is pitch black. There is no light out there. There's no signs of humanity. And that alone was terrifying. Just the whatever. And then it goes to a narrow 2-lane blacktop with drop off. And so I'm driving and trying to figure out where I am. And I'm checking the map. And I say, okay, I get here and then I need to take a left. And it's in the reservation at this point. It's like, okay, I need to take this left and I'll go this way and I'll go up. And I'm driving Route 666, and I'm driving, and I finally realize, okay, I should have hit this thing by now. And I'm still in the middle of nowhere. I finally hit a place with a left turn. Okay, yeah, this has got to be it. There's no other turns on the map. This has got to be where I'm at. I turn, I drive, and I end up at some little reservation town at 2:30 in the morning. And I feel very exposed. I am not supposed to be here. So I find a payphone and I call AAA, who I had a AAA membership. And I'm like, can you help me? And they're like, no. Like, where are you at? I don't know. Well, I can't tell you how to get where you need to go if you can't tell me where you are. Well, I'm at this place. It looks like this. And I got to imagine the poor lady on the phone being like, how am I supposed to help you? So I turn around and I go, oh, okay, I'll just go back. I'll go back to 40 and I'll restart. And I start driving and I swear there was something in the road. And I still to this day don't know what it was. But I ended up swerving and driving off the road through scrub brush for about 30 yards before I'm able to get back on the road.
What was?
And it was just this dark shape. I don't claim to know what it was because I have no idea. It was there. It was in the road. It wasn't there before, and then it was. Now, again, this is 2:30 in the morning. I might have been.
Sure.
But
was it like the size of a truck? Was it
about the size of a big dog?
The size of a big dog.
Mm-hmm. Ever been a deer?
It wasn't tall enough. It was like a mastiff sized, about that height.
So you basically had a black dog experience in the middle of this place.
Yeah.
Well, to bounce off that too, when he talked about the pitch black thing, we've talked about country dark.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And again, I'm guessing you're from somewhere with street lights and
yeah, Greensboro.
Yeah, so it's a reasonably big town. Mm-hmm. Yeah, your dark and my dark are two different things because I'm used to that pitch black, ain't no ambient light, and your idea of dark is grayish.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine when you hit that stretch of nothing, it was like,
yeah, the
God.
headlights felt smaller. It made the dark bigger.
Yeah.
Because I was suddenly very aware of how little illumination they threw out there. And then I finally find another turnoff, and I turn there. And at this point, I'm also running low on gas. I'm at like fumes.
oh, God.
So
in the middle of the desert.
In the middle of the desert, in the middle of the res, in the middle of nowhere.
At 3 in the morning.
At 3 in the morning. I finally stumble across a gas station / laundromat. And it was open. It was a 24-hour laundromat gas station. And I managed to pull in there, get gas, and I go up to the poor lady or guy working behind the counter. I'm like, where am I? And I had ended up back in Arizona.
Huh.
I still don't know how I got back from New Mexico back into Arizona. I need to stop for the night.
Did you by any chance have missing time?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But if it was just literally by the time I rolled in there, I was just glad to see lights and gas, and thankfully.
Wow.
So it's one of those things that just stays with me. I found a little hotel, stayed there for the night, and then the morning, and then I was fine. I was able to drive. But that's a night that I will never forget.
Okay.
It's also the same road trip where I discovered that Art Bell existed because I was looking for something on the radio to listen to and stumbled across Art Bell, and they were talking about the space station satellite or something that was coming down, but it's a plot.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So you discovered the existence of Coast to Coast.
Yes.
While driving Route 666 in the middle of the desert while getting lost impossibly and seeing a shadow shape thing in the road. That's a heck of a night.
It was.
Yeah.
And then it ended with me in Salt Lake City, so it didn't have a good ending.
And then it got weirder.
Then it got strange, yeah.
But yeah, that's my story with Route 66. And didn't they change the name?
I was going to ask, is it still Route 666?
No, back in the early 2000s, or maybe mid-90s, I'm trying to think, Bill Richardson was governor of New Mexico, and the Navajo are now predominantly Mormon. The majority of Christians on the res are Mormon. So they started a big campaign to change the number because they decommissioned Route 66. So why do we have a spur of a road that doesn't exist? So they changed it to 491 because somewhere in Utah it hits 191 barely, so it can count on the highway grid.
Okay.
The highway grid is a whole other nerd thing that no one cares about but me.
I also am a big fan, so nuts on that. So basically there was Route 66, and then 666 was like the belt line or something like that. If you live in Asheville, 240. If you live in Wilmington, 5.
It's 285 coming from Winston back down toward Charlotte.
Yeah.
But it was basically a shortcut to nowhere. And on the highway grid back in the 20s, it was just, you got 166, 266 dot going west. And despite what some folks believe, the bureaucrats in Washington are not Satanists. They don't plan this stuff. Sometimes it's just numerical sequence. And that's how we got the number. But of course, you've got kids stealing signs. And you've got, like you say, it's a 2-lane blacktop with no guardrail, 50 feet of clearance. Easy. So that's how you get the stories. And then the Navajo said, let's just change it. And everybody said, well, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I was also really lucky because, like I was saying, there's that drop-off grade, and there are parts where it just goes off and there's land, but then there are parts where there's gullies and ditches or like a longer drop. I managed to go off the road at just one of the right spots where I didn't total the car.
Yeah.
Did you, and the answer to this might be no, or I don't remember, or whatever, and that's fine. And the answer to this might be, I don't feel like talking about it.
This is the first time I've ever told this story in public.
Really? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. I mean that very sincerely. Even in a room full of people interested in this stuff, it's very scary to share experiences. For me, anyway. Did you experience any sort of like emotional quality to seeing that thing?
Just fear. I was very, that's why I swerved. Is like, because I will tell you, there may be a woodchuck that gave its life in my travels because I was not going to swerve. I wasn't like gunning for it, but
right.
But this thing, I was like, I can't hit that.
Really? Oh, like a deep-seated
and it wasn't like an intellectual thought. It was just the later I was able to okay, don't hit that. But it was just a pure emotional punch of don't hit that.
Yeah.
If I hit that, more bad crap will happen that I don't want to deal with. Not I'm going to wreck the car. Or bad juju, do not touch.
Yeah. When I was in college and I worked in a haunted library just long enough to discover that it was haunted, and then I quit.
Me, by the way.
Thank you. There was a very raw emotional quality of I need to leave now, and then afterwards was when I was able to think about it a little more and analyze that experience and start thinking, I think it was making me think that. I think it was saying. So anyway, I'm always fascinated by that because I do think that when we encounter the strange, we do tend to have some sort of emotional element to it that we are not conscious of and we probably did not generate, but that we can reflect on usefully later. At least I find that useful.
Well, we've had one really good story.
Oh, but I'm not quite done with 666 yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I shouldn't.
I will only
Fix
say
that.
I would be fascinated to find out if any part of that was a road before it was a highway. Was any part of it like a stagecoach road or a mail route or a Pony Express route or anything like that? I would be curious to know if there were experiences there prior to the rise of the popular culture idea of 666 having significance.
Yeah, and I'd like to know, has any of the incidence numbers like gone down since the change?
Yes.
Because they've also done road improvements.
Oh, okay.
They put up the guardrails and all that stuff. Funny you should mention that. There is a story that during one of the Navajo Wars in the 1860s, there was supposedly a massacre of a wagon train somewhere in the area. Now, of course, you're talking like 300 miles of highway.
Yeah.
So it's possible some road braves decided to take out 3 wagons and a horse. But supposedly, and that shows up as well, in fact, the Vanishing Hitchhiker is supposed to be a pioneer era female. She's not wearing the mini dress from the 60s. It's floral bonnet and knee-length and ankle-length dress. So now, how much of that? Well, I'm in the Old West, therefore the ghost has to look the part. You're going to pick up a pilgrim in New Mexico, but Laura Ingalls Wilder is certainly a possibility. So I don't know how much of that has been colored, but as far as it being a road, that'll have to be a follow-up thing.
Yeah, I really want to research that now. One of the things that we'll talk about in the second half is why certain places are fascinating to us. And something like that, it really makes me wonder, did weird stuff start happening there because people expected weird stuff to happen? Or did weird stuff happen there and thus people noticed?
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
But you were about to move on to another topic, I think.
Yeah, we've had Gary's great story. And what triggered the topic, I think, was a Facebook post that I shared about a local ghost car in the creepiest mountain range in North Carolina.
Charlie is going to end up listening to this episode because he's going to be so excited.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say.
Yeah.
Hi, Charlie.
Hey, Charlie. the Uwaris on Highway 49 over near Asheboro area adjacent. That's supposed to be a ghost car.
Now, to set the scene for people for just a second, North Carolina 49 runs from Charlotte to Asheboro, more or less parallel to I-85, and then it runs along with US 64 for a little ways, and then from Siler City north, it runs up into Burlington and up towards Virginia. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and road nerd alert, Lawrence, South Carolina to, I think, Martinsville.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it's SC 49, NC 49. Virginia 49.
Did not know that.
Road nerd, sorry. Had to put that in there.
And it's an old 2-lane highway.
Yeah, been around since the 30s, and outside of Charlotte, they haven't done much to it. I think there was original pavement where we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, there's 5 miles of it in Charlotte that's 4 lanes.
Yeah. But supposedly there's a Ford that runs up, brake check, and it never passes, but it gets right on your bumper, tailgating in the middle of the night, 2-lane road, middle of nowhere. If you've ever been through the Uwaris, there's a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah.
So it hit maybe a few random deer. But there have been numerous reports of this car, and I think it's a black, like 70s era Ford. It's like a sedan. And it just runs up on people for about 3 or 4 miles, and of course, middle of the night, you're going to let him pass, especially if you're more vulnerable. You're going to be like, please, wave around, get the hell away. And after about 2 miles of it, just blip, gone. But I think you had mentioned having an experience, not with the car, but with the road.
Oh, no. I had an experience with the car.
See, I'm wrong, as usual.
I read that on Facebook just as a post from a friend, and I was like, wait a second, because you had posted that as, isn't this an interesting legend, basically?
Yeah.
Now, I used to drive North Carolina 49 a lot, because when we were first dating, my husband lived in Charlotte, I lived in Durham, and I-85, there was like a 40-mile construction zone on I-85. And so trying to take I-85 from Durham to Charlotte was like asking to sit in the car for 5 hours. And so I would just take 49. Beautiful drive through the middle of the country, lovely trip. And it's the sort of road that there's stuff along the way, but a lot of it is just you're driving past fields, and there's an old farmhouse in the middle of a field, and it's lovely and it's very scenic and very pastoral. And our usual habit was that I would drive back on Sunday afternoon, broad daylight. To give you an aside of the sort of road that 49 is, there was a gas station where I would stop for gas sometimes. And the first time I walked into that gas station, there was a middle-aged woman working behind the counter, and there was a squirrel climbing around on her shoulders. And I said, wow, that's really cool. That is an interesting pet. And she said, oh, this is Austin. He's my special needs squirrel. And I said, okay. That sounds like a story. When somebody chatted about Austin, the special needs squirrel, he, as a baby squirrel, had fallen out of a tree in her yard, gotten injured, had a head injury, was never able to reintegrate into the squirrel
community.
Yeah. And so in the process of caring for him, she had effectively tamed him. And so, he just lived with her. And he just hung out with her at work all the time. And I loved this. And she was like, if you're comfortable with it, then he'll climb around on you too. And I was like, oh, that'd be fantastic. So Austin, the special needs squirrel, climbed around on me while they're talking. It was so cool. But this is the sort of road where you are stepping into a liminal space out of the gate.
Yeah.
You are not in regular life if you spend the right time on that road. So one Sunday, by chance, I was leaving after dark. And I said to my husband, I'm going to take 49 back because I don't feel like sitting on I-85. And he said, I don't know if that's a great idea because you're going to be in the middle of nowhere all night. And I said, well, I grew up in the country, and didn't bother me. You couldn't get anywhere after dark without being in the middle of nowhere where I grew up. So I was just like, whatever. I drove back on 49. The vast majority of it is just a 55-mile-per-hour highway. And you truck along and you do the speed limit and you're fine. And I'm trucking along doing the speed limit and a car flies up behind me. And I was like, well, okay, there's plenty of dotted yellow lines around here. Yeah. They can just pass me. I'm not interested in policing this person.
Right.
But they totally got right up on my bumper and were trying to play bumper buggy with me.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, well, okay, this is just some jerk, and they're going to have their fun, and then they're going to pass me, and it's going to be fine. And it must have been 4 miles that they rode my bumper. And I wasn't going to tap my brakes or do anything dumb like that. I didn't want to interact with this person. I wanted this person to find me very boring so that they would leave me alone.
Yeah.
And they just kept being up on me. And then they pulled out into the other lane instead of pass and came up right beside me. And it was a 70s hatchback. And I don't remember the make or model. I didn't really have a chance to notice that. By that point, I was starting to get freaked out. I was like, oh, this person is going to try to do something bad. I need to figure out a way to get them away from me.
Yeah.
And I was not interested in trying to outrun them. So at that point, once they weren't behind me anymore, I did tap my brakes a little so that they could just get past me.
Yeah.
And they got past me, got in front of me, and started tapping their brakes and trying to play reverse bumper buggy with me. And I was just like, I'm just going to coast for a little bit, let these people get away, let them just go about their lives. They can go harass somebody else now. And that must have been for another mile or so. So at this point, it's been going for minutes, like long, very tense, very fraught minutes.
Yeah.
And then they just warp drive, just shoot away from me around a curve. I can still remember which curve it is, and it is in fact one right after we had driven past the big sign for Uwharries National Forest. And I was like, well, okay, I just really hope that they're not sitting in the road when I come around this curve, because I am not ready to have some weird confrontation with a stranger. That is not my scene. So I very gently go around the curve of this highway to see what is ahead of me, because around this curve was another really long straightaway. Nothing. This is a curve that when you go around it, you can see for easily 3/4 of a mile, something like that.
Yeah.
They had seconds, and there was just nothing on the road.
Ooh.
It's solid woods on either side at that point.
Yeah.
So it's not like they just disappeared down somebody's driveway. They just were gone. Like the car no longer existed. Mm-hmm. And then I very tenderly finished my drive, got back to Durham, texted Michael and said, I made it home. And I think I'm going to take I-85 if I ever leave that late again. And afterwards, he was like, see, I told you something weird was going to happen. And I was like, lesson learned. Lesson learned.
Well, the UREs are so eaten up with weird that Fred Morgan wrote a book about it, Haunted UREs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you've got demon winds and...
What's a demon wind? Because I don't know.
Okay, the demon
I
wind
had the
story...
chili.
The demon wind story, and I'm not going to do it justice because I'm going from my feeble mind. Basically,
I think I broke my goal.
I'll get back. Keep talking. I'll be back in a minute.
but during the Civil War, father was a miser, oldest son goes off to war, youngest son has special needs, gets it into his head that he should be the heir apparent. You know, he was the loyal son that stayed home. There's a false report that the oldest son is killed up in Virginia. Younger son kills daddy to steal the gold and buries it. Stoneman comes on his raid in 65. The son, who's already looked at sketchily by the neighbors, buries the gold in the middle of one of the roads in the UREs. Maybe 49, probably some side road in the middle of nowhere. And supposedly the Union officers found out about the gold being buried. They were going to dig it up. When they dug it up, the wind swept in from the opposite of the prevailing direction. It went east-west instead of west-east, whatever. And on the backside of the hard breeze, a faint rebel yell was heard, and the speculation is that the oldest son protected the birthright by bringing a troop of Confederate cavalry to come sweep the Yankees away from the gold. But if you go through there now, hiking or mountain biking, whatever, and you stop in the wrong place, the demon wind comes to clear you out so you do not mess with the gold.
Huh.
So, and there are hundreds of others. The book's an inch thick, and it's a really good read from back in the original publication was like the 50s, maybe.
I do know that the UREs is a place that has cryptids, it has goblins, it's got the hunter, the ghost
Purgatory.
the hunter of Purgatory Mountain.
Yeah.
It's got all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
But I read your post and said, okay, that's a cool story, except that I have actually had that experience. And you were like, what? Okay, we have to talk about it at ConGregate. So that's where that came from.
Yeah, there are so, like you were saying, there's so many stories out of that area.
Yes.
It's not trying to piss off whatever lives there by saying this. Technically, they're not mountains because they're not tall enough, but they are so distinct from the surrounding landscape that they are. And they're very old. They're old, as I understand it, is in the way that Appalachia is old. And so there's a lot of weird stuff up there.
Well, technically, the UREs were before the Appalachians. I mean, in the old line on social media about the Appalachians are older than fossils.
Older than bones.
The UREs are older than the Appalachians because basically the smaller the mountain, the older it is. So you can imagine the creep show that's happened there. And plus there were people there first. And where there's people speaking on behalf of the panel, weird follows.
Absolutely.
So you can imagine you've got 300 years of weird plus the residual effects of that fun stuff.
I haven't paid any attention to the time.
We can talk about this.
Oh, okay. Then
We're trucking right along.
We are.
To use the phrase.
Yes. So let's wrap up the first episode of this recording by talking about an even more local.
Well,
Sorry. Go ahead. Keep going.
I got to give South Carolina some props because you North Carolina boys want to hog all the fun on this. I can't even get a sticker that has the South Carolina flag on it. I have to have a North Carolina flag on my Arcane Carolina sticker.
I'm pretty sure I have some of those.
Oh, I know.
So, okay.
I have to give you a little bit of business. But Charleston, the mothership of ghosts in South Carolina, because it was first, they've got one on the old Cooper River Bridge. The landmark, steel truss, not the monstrosity that's there now, but the original OG bridge. In February 1929, a ship crew misunderstood an order. Charleston's a major port, especially pre-World War II. And they were told to drag anchor to get under the bridge because they were really high for the time cargo ship. Well, the crew said, oh, pull anchor. So they pull it up, and then they decided to rev the engine. And they took out one of the supports on the bridge, and the vibration caused the section, because in the 20s, they paved roads with concrete in sections, like 10 by 10 sections. Well, an entire section of the bridge fell into the Cooper River. And there was a car driven by the Lawson family on that piece of pavement. And fast forward decades, people report seeing a 27 Chevy that's painted paint blue of all colors coming up the bridge from Charleston going to Mount Pleasant, and it gets just before the apex and it vanishes where that slab fell. And of course the bridge is gone now, but that's the ending's where the fun is. But reported seeing the guy driving has this nasty greenish tint to him, like he's got the stomach bug to end off stomach bugs. And he's both hands 10 and 2 straight ahead, and the wife is sitting there, yeah, it's okay, and then there are 2 kids in the back with the same 1,000-yard stare in the back seat, and been seen different times, day and night. And there are dozens of reports over the last almost 100 years, well, correction, about 75 years. When they replaced the bridge with the Ravenel Bridge, the big thing that's there now with the big white columns and all that stuff, they turned the Cooper River Bridge into an artificial reef. What I'm wondering about, if I could scuba dive, I'd go find out, do the Lawsons still try to get over the bridge even now?
It would be very...
That's for next hour, but that's one of those things I'm like,
It's one of those things, to see this car suddenly just driving over air where the bridge was.
Well, no, it's not.
Just seeing that would scare the pants off.
Yeah, I was going to say, but that was one thing I asked, because I asked some friends who were down there around 2005 when they replaced the bridge, did you see the car? And of course I get this, oh hell, he's on a ghost kick. Y'all sit down. No, because I'm not Gary. It's like, yeah, 600 feet above the river, all of a sudden, boop. But I can only imagine being in a car, because it's one of my minor phobias. You're going over 485 in Charlotte, and you're like 16 bridges up, and I'm waiting for that one slab to go. I've heard that story since I was like in high school, so it's like, crap. No, let's get across, and now I can sit in traffic for 3 hours. Let's not be in the middle of the bridge. That's too damn creepy. So yeah, let's get on pavement.
Now I need someone to write me a story of where something like this has happened. They remove the bridge, and that ghost car gets to where the bridge was and is gone, and the ghost is like, "Where's my bridge?" And it's just pissed off, sitting there like, "Where's my bridge?"
It's
fine. We share a brain, because I've had that same thought, and I've actually started it and been like, even for me, nobody's going to believe it. But yeah, I have to play with that.
I feel like it would be a lot of fun.
If only I knew some writers.
I know, if only. I feel like it would be a lot of fun in a ghost story, though. If a ghost is perfectly happy to do its thing, as long as it just gets to keep doing its thing. As long as it just gets to keep, like, acting out the stone tape theory real. Just keep playing out the reel again and again. And then as soon as it can't, that's when it becomes vengeful.
Well, that kind of I know you were trying to wrap this up, but I'm going to keep going.
Oh, no, that's fine. We've got 2 hours.
There's the story that's, you both are probably familiar with this, about the whole ghost walking through walls.
Yeah.
Because the house was remodeled, and there used to be like a doorway there.
And like a bunch of stories from Europe of ghostly Roman legions that march where their hips are at ground on level because they're marching on the level of the Roman road.
But see, part of that, and that ties to stone tape and the residual thing. One thing I've observed over the years was the telling, because I go back to the 19th century with some of these sources to pull the threads so I know where to go find these things. Mm-hmm. And there are numerous reports where a figure is seen in reports from like 1905. 1930, you hear the footsteps. 1970, the lights go on and off because Grandma always got up at 5, walked back bedroom to kitchen, and cut on the back porch light to feed the dog every day at 5:05. But 5:05, the kitchen light kept coming on. And then by the 2000s, there's a cold spot that pops up in the hall. And probably now there's nothing because it's that videotape theory. Well, if one of y'all grabbed your mom and dad's wedding tape from back in the day and watched it, the day after the wedding, it's crystal clear. It's high def. Mm-hmm. Now it's more fuzzed than people. And if your kids watch it in 20 years, there won't be anything left but static. And that's the degrade thing. And the part of that ties in with the residuals and the stone tape retaining the information and the energy from the living with the quartz in the walls. Mm-hmm. Again, those are 2 extra episodes we'll have to find time to do because
the second hour of this, we're going to talk about that. And that's a question I literally just wrote down to make sure that we talk more about this.
Okay. We can do that.
So one final vehicle, ghostly vehicle, that's very local. Let me look up my note so I'll say the person's name correctly. Last year at ConGregate, I talked about a story from a book called Haunted Winston-Salem. It's in the Haunted America series. I think you've written books in that series. Are your Upcountry, South Carolina books
Upcountry was before Haunted America. The last 2 with History Press are Haunted America.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the triad-based books for that is Haunted Winston-Salem by Michael Bricker. Mm-hmm. He grew up in downtown Winston-Salem in the 50s and 60s, living with his grandmother, who had lived in downtown Winston-Salem for many years. And he describes a lot of stories that he was told as a kid, hanging out at the general store, basically hanging out at the local grocery that was down the street. But he also describes some of his own experiences. And he lived in 1961, at 119 South Broad Street in Winston-Salem, which is like about 6 blocks diagonally that way.
Okay.
If you know Winston-Salem well enough, it's just north of 421 in one of the places where the old streets of Winston-Salem cross over the highway.
Yeah.
And at the time, he notes, it was a house that had previously been owned by the guy who was the head doctor of the downtown Winston-Salem sanitarium. So his grandmother was also very comfortable with ghost stories and knew a lot of local ghost stories. And at one point, they lived across the street from a house that turned out to be haunted, things like that. Their house was not haunted, but she would point out to him, oh, that's a place that's supposed to be haunted. That's a place that's supposed to be haunted, etc. Well, he tells the story that he used to hear old-timers talk about Nissan wagons, which were a specific brand and design of wagon that was very popular with tobacco farmers in the region. It was popular for lots of purposes, but that was the chief purpose that people used them in Winston-Salem.
Tobacco in Winston? I'm shocked.
A city named after cigarette brands has tobacco wagons? I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
And he describes them in the book, and they sound like they look like a Conestoga wagon, but smaller. Mm-hmm. They were known for having very bright green bodies and bright red axles. The axles would be painted bright red, and then the canvas top would just be plain. Yeah. But it was a very striking visual, and he includes some historical photos from downtown Winston-Salem on tobacco market days, when the streets in the 1870s and 1880s would just be filled with identical Nissan wagons being pulled into town by tobacco farmers that had loaded a bunch of tobacco up in the back. And mostly those market days were on Saturday mornings. Mm-hmm. In the book, he describes having awakened one Saturday morning to hear what sounded to him like horse hooves out in the street outside their house. It was very early in the morning, and he said this was very unusual. He did not, in the 1960s, generally hear horses clopping around in downtown Winston-Salem, but also he generally did not wake up super early on Saturday mornings. He went to his grandmother, who did wake up early, regularly, and said, "Hey, do you hear a horse?" She said, "Oh, yeah, this is a ghost wagon." He was like, "What?" So she was like, "Yeah, we'll go look at it right now." They went out into the street, and he said that there was a Nissan wagon being pulled by a horse with a farmer in bib overalls. They were obviously phantasmal, I guess I'll say.
Translucent?
Yeah, they were clearly a spiritual experience, phenomenon kind of thing happening, but didn't seem aggressive, didn't seem to notice anything other than that Broad Street was a very old street in Winston-Salem. Broad Street was the street that many farmers south of Winston-Salem or east of Winston-Salem would, or west rather, would bring their market goods in on. It was one of those streets that would be filled with this kind of wagon on a Saturday morning. He said he didn't understand why there was only one. He didn't understand why it was that farmer. Did something bad happen to that farmer that day? No telling. But he said that his grandmother was like, there's always been a ghost wagon that comes by on Saturday mornings. More often than not, you'll hear a wagon on Broad Street on a Saturday morning in downtown Winston-Salem. And it's this ghost tobacco farmer.
Would it just get to a certain point and then vanish? Or
He said that yes, generally people's experiences of it, he was able to eventually identify other people who were familiar with this phenomenon and had experienced it. Generally speaking, somebody would hear it or they would see it. They would see it go by, and if they tried to chase it or catch up to it, then it would disappear around a corner, take a turn, whatever, and they were never able to catch up to it again. Not entirely dissimilar to the car on North Carolina 49.
Yeah.
He said that, in fact, when his grandmother was done telling him, like pointing at the wagon and saying, and maybe he made it all up. I don't know. I've sold a lot of books where I made it all up. I just labeled them as fiction. But he says that his grandmother was like, yeah, that wagon is a ghost. And he was like, I'm going to follow it. And she was like, that's pointless. He was like, I'll show you. He went and chasing it and went around a corner to see where it was, and it was gone.
Well,
He said that many times over the course of the rest of the time he lived there, on Saturday mornings, he would wake up on purpose to see if he was going to hear the ghost wagon. If he did, he would run out and try to catch up to it, and he would never be able to catch it.
well, we all know, unless you're stupid like me, don't chase the ghost.
yeah, they're already in a bad mood usually.
Well, no, just because that's where you don't know what'll happen if you. It's basically the dog
who
catches the
catches
car. If you did catch up with the ghost wagon, are you going to become the footman riding in the back, or are you just going to be zapped? Another plane of existence. They don't go in the woods, don't whistle in the woods.
Yeah.
Same kind of thing.
If you heard something or you didn't.
Yeah.
Why are you going after this thing? Because the consequences are unknown. How many times have we come across stuff in folklore where the guy caught up to it? He chased the ghost girl, he chased the mermaid back to the sea, and there's never a happy ending.
Do you think that those legends are that common? I'm trying to figure out how to construct this question. And maybe this is a question for the second half. Because the second half, we're going to be talking about places we've never gotten to investigate and wish we had, and why we think places are important, meaningful, powerful. I'm not really sure what words we'll end up using for that, but
Yeah.
and why we're so fascinated by that as individuals and also as a society. And so this question might be better saved, but do you think that those stories always end in don't be the person who catches up to it, as a way to just serve a really mundane teaching kids a lesson kind of thing? Or do you think that arose from hearing stories of people who did catch up to it?
Well, the Phalid, the changeling, that kind of thing, I think that has something to do with the European descent, like the Western European side, the British and the German especially. But I think it's just the object lesson. Don't chase stuff you may not want to catch. Because even if you didn't catch the ghost wagon, well, they're doing road construction and there's a 25 foot to the sewer pipe just around the corner. And if I'm going hell bent for leather after ghost wagon and I step off in that, I'm gonna have a bad day.
And maybe that's what the ghost was trying to lead you to.
And
Maybe.
and the same way, because you always, the beautiful lady on the cliffs of Dover or whatever, you chase after her because she's your ain't true love. And she floats out about 10 feet off, just right there at that first row of chairs. And I run and leap into her arms, and well, 250 feet later, I'm a pancake. So I think it's just, don't be stupid and chase crap you don't want to catch. Unless you're Tally, in which case, take off after it.
To quote the wisdom of the 90s, don't go chasing waterfalls. Stay with
I can't think of a better way for us to end this episode than that. That's so wonderful. So, yeah, we have talked now for plenty of this first hour. And so we're going to take a break for 5 or 10 minutes, let ourselves get some to drink, all that good stuff. And then we'll come back and we'll have a second topic. We'll continue the conversation in a different angle.
Marvelous. Sounds good.
Thank you very much for listening. Thanks for being here. Now I will pause the recording sooner or later.
You've been listening to Arcane Carolinas. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. For more episodes, behind the scenes information, and links to our social media, check out www.arcanecarolinas.com, where you can also buy the Arcane Carolinas book.
And if you like award-winning horror and science fiction, check out my books at michaelgwilliamsbooks.com. And if you have story suggestions, comments, or questions, email us at arcanecarolinas@gmail.com. And thanks for listening.